All right, Gaea. Well, welcome. Hello. My name is Brett Bey, and I'm a guest interviewer here with the Arroyo Grande Citizen, and we are here today with Gaea Powell. She is going to be running for the mayoral seat here on the Arroyo Grande City Council, and today is about getting to know you. We want to get to know about you a little bit personally, why you are doing what you're doing. This is being in the public eye and being a public servant is not something that's easy to do. So we're excited to hear about what's your why, what's your reason that you're doing what you're doing, and get into some of the issues. I guess a few housekeeping things at Arroyo Grande Citizen. Really pride ourselves on being a nonpartisan and a non-biased news source. Don't endorse any one particular candidate. We want the public and the community to know about you and to try and make it as an informed decision as possible, not based on the person, but the issues behind the person. So does that all sound great to you?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. No, we're really glad to be here with you. And I say we, myself coming on with the Arroyo Grande Citizen is pretty exciting. But I know the crew at AG Citizen is really working hard on doing what they do, and I'm glad I get to be part of it.
They do, and I'm glad they do what they do.
Yeah,
it's appreciated.
Well, very good. So I guess a few things is I want to know is, as I said before, to be a public servant is not easy. You're under the microscope, and you're in the public eye and open to public scrutiny. If you were to be elected to be on the city council, specifically in the mayoral seat, what's your why? What's going to keep you going amidst people maybe disagreeing with you? And flat out, sometimes people just don't like us, whether it be personally or professionally. What's going to keep you going on those days when it gets tough?
Well, I'm very experienced in having a tough situation.
Sure.
So I worked in the entertainment industry for 25 years, and then I was recruited by Arnold Schwarzenegger to be his chief of staff while he was running for governor and when he was putting his team together. And so I actually never thought in a million years, because once he got elected, I was like, you have fun with that. Because we were filming Terminator 3 at the same time as he was putting his campaign together and starting to campaign, etc. And and it was great because I got to go to all the political meetings and I just knew it was very interesting in the entertainment industry, but politics is like a whole different level of of interesting characters, let's say. And so when I, just fast forwarding, so I'm used to that kind of pressure, dedication. I know what it takes to the energy that it takes to really, be a public servant. I am also the volunteer executive director of the Arroyo Grande Village Improvement Association, so I volunteer, unpaid to do that. So when I started doing that position in 2019, I started to get to know the mayor and some of the city council, and I was just kind of concerned about some of their decisions, some of their fiscal decisions, to even having some of their personal beliefs and ideologies bleeding into governing. So that concerned me. So the fiscal, what I would say is fiscal irresponsibility, and the ideologies, because it's really, being the mayor, of Arroyo Grande, you're basically a city council member. So working with, hopefully, if I'm elected, when I'm elected, as my friends tell me I need to say, that I can help kind of change that attitude and get rid of any kind of ideology that's influencing our city government or local government at all, because it's not just our city. And so with that, the ideology concern got me very interested, and then also some of the treatment that I was seeing, the way that people that would get up and speak were treated. I just didn't think that was appropriate. I didn't think it was very friendly or welcoming, or that they were being heard. And in fact,
definitely something I know we wanted to touch on later is talking about if somebody's been, either watching the city council meetings online or attending them in person. There's been some recent events where the public comments have been reduced from 3 minutes to 1, which I know that's something you're passionate about. So I'd love to touch on that. But I appreciate you've been telling what you're passionate about.
Sure. So my why was witnessing that, like I was the brunt of it, and then I also saw it with other things. So my why is because I am a business consultant, so when I see wasted money or things being mismanaged, it drives me crazy.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then also, I love Arroyo Grande. You know, I have traveled, you know, a lot in my life. I've had wonderful experiences and being able to live, you know, in different locations, and kind of, some people would say it was like the life of privilege or fun or whatever, you know, their perception is. And my husband and I joke with each other because we laugh at, you know, folks who are going to go on vacation. It's like, why would we go on vacation? We live in paradise, right? Yes. Exactly.
I'm so glad you touched on that, Gaea. Is that, from what I understand, you weren't born here. So tell me a little bit, what drew you to the Central Coast in Arroyo Grande, and why have you decided to not only make this your home, but why do you want to be part of the decision making that makes Arroyo Grande the special place that it is?
That's a great question. I grew up in Thousand Oaks, and then we moved to Westlake Village. So I went to the first year that Westlake Village high school was built, so that long ago. And so what I saw before I ended up in Hollywood was LA kind of creeping in. You know, so that's very concerning to me as a resident of Arroyo Grande. Yeah. And so over the years, I saw, you know, my hometown basically be engulfed by Los Angeles, where it's like you start to build on every single square inch, and all the agricultural is gone, et cetera. And so what brought me up to the Central Coast is when Arnold got elected, I decided to just do consulting gigs where people just hire me. So it'd be like long-term, but not forever jobs. And at the same time, my father's health was failing. So I decided to move up to Atascadero originally because some friends of mine had moved up there, and I kept coming up, and I'm like, this really reminds me of Thousand Oaks before it was engulfed by LA. And then in 2000, I think it was about 2016, I ended up in Arroyo Grande and in the unincorporated area. And then I went ahead and rented a place in the city because I was just so concerned with, you know, what I feel is not a good direction that the city's going. And also I really think, like, you know, Christmas, I know I'm kind of all over the place. Christmas is really special. Like when I first, you know, came to the area, and I would drive through this incredible historic town, and it's like you're turning back, you know, the hands of time. It was just so charming and lovely. So that's why I ended up, you know, when I saw that position, that part-time position as a, you know, working with the Arroyo Grande Village Improvement Association, I, you know, leaped at the chance to be involved. And so that's what brought me here. It's like, I really just, I love it. It reminds me of my hometown. Yeah. And I just want to keep it, you know, from being wrecked by, you know, government dictates basically from the state.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that as someone that's been raised here from a very young age, is that I appreciate we always talk about here in Arroyo Grande is there's something in the water that for me is that attending school all throughout here, and then, you know, moving away and then moving back is like, I know it's special to me because I was raised here, but to hear from somebody that came from the outside and comes here and wants to improve it, it's exciting for people like me to hear that you really do love it. And I think that's what makes Arroyo Grande special. And even going back to some of the history that we have within Arroyo Grande, it's that sense of community and that pride of we can link arms with people on, you know, each side and take care of our community and for the betterment of the whole. So that's great. I'm glad that you're passionate about that as well.
And it is a very welcoming, you know, lovely place to be.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. So I wanted to go over, I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but obviously you're running against the incumbent mayor, and wanted to ask you specifically, and I'd say maybe keep it down to, if not 1 point, maybe 2 to 3 points on what you feel, what your stance is different from what's the current mayor and the current city council, and what you're going to do differently. I'd say, aside from personal beliefs or ideologies, some of those concrete points of what are you going to do on, you know, your first month, 6 months, and year in office if you were to be elected.
One of my priorities would be to eliminate any wasted money on especially consultants that don't live in our area. So special interest consultants, I think, is a huge waste of taxpayers' money. And even if the city gets grants, partial grants for those consultants, it's still taxpayers' money. And I think that we can roll up our sleeves as a community and, you know, figure out figure out how we need to move forward without outside consultants. We're wasting $1.2 million, in my view, we're wasting on the general plan consultant, and then a DEI consultant, another $20,000. So those kind of things I would eliminate. And I do think it's really important. My father was an artist, and I do think it's very important into our culture, and it's been proven throughout history to combine the creative with like the engineer brains and then the problem solvers. So really trying to entice citizens to get involved and make it fun and creative and coming together to resolve these or solve these problems on our own. And even like with the water issue, I instead of getting involved in special interest or getting swept up into things that maybe the state is overreaching, that we just focus on Arroyo Grande first, and we just happen to be very lucky that we right now it's an overflow of water, but we just I think we need to focus on Arroyo Grande first always. And I do think that we need to always lean on the Constitution of the United States as our safeguard to guide us. So any decision that I will make would be, emotions have to be set aside, because when you make emotional decisions, which I think our city council does a lot of, which I disagree with, is that you reflect back to the Constitution. Like you really have to focus on the constitutional republic, because we're not a democracy, and people get very confused about that. It's not majority rule. Democracies have failed throughout history. That's why we have a constitutional republic that's based on a democratic system. But it's not a democracy. In fact, you can't find the word democracy in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So I think that when I'm making decisions, it'll always be with that in mind. Like I really think that's kind of like the Bible that we always go back to, especially when it's a very difficult decision. So we make certain that our biases aren't guiding us in the wrong direction. And I think that really being careful about overdevelopment, because I know that there's a lot of regulation that's dictated by the state. And I do think we need to push back, because the state shouldn't dictate what's best for Arroyo Grande. And we have the way that our government is set up, we have these safeguards, as it comes down from the federal government to the state government. And in fact, the states are actually supposed to be little countries with them, independent. And then we get especially in California, we're getting a lot of government overreach and dictates about what our communities have to do. And the DOJ, is that what he is? The Attorney General. He's actually proud of like suing communities if they don't comply. It's like, so because you guys are kings, and they're like, well, this doesn't work for our community. So just, trying to figure out ways to push back and have the representation for Arroyo Grande to make sure it's always in the best interest of the people that live here, because, the state doesn't live here. So a lot of the housing, like pushing, we have to have affordable housing. It's like, well, who decides what's affordable, who's going to get the housing, and how much housing will actually be achieved. It's like we have
sliding scale throughout
right. It's like, and we live in California, and this is a beach community. So there's also capitalism, and it's the reality. So not, using these, little shiny objects to think like, I'm working on, I hear it every political cycle. It's like the homeless, housing, water, but it's like, what are we really tangibly doing to protect our community, to be sovereign?
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate everything you just said, confirming what you'd said. So one of the things that you'd really be prioritizing is removal of outside consultants, and something else is putting AG and putting Arroyo Grande first in your decision making, and then being careful or pushing back on government oversight. So those are some great points. Thank you for sharing. Something that I was interested to hear is, if you were elected into office, if you received a grant for $1 million for the city of Arroyo Grande, what are you going to do with
it? Put it into the roads.
Okay, tell me more. Tell me why.
Well, I think that it's obvious that we have to keep the roads as repaired and repaved and safe, and eliminate all the potholes is one of the most important things that we would need to spend our money on. And if we weren't wasting money, we could focus on doing just that. So it's $1 million doesn't really go that far, but if I did have $1 million, that's what it would be used on for sure. And I think trying to figure out creative ways to draw in new businesses so that we can increase, our income without, increasing taxes or adding new taxes. And again, back to that creativity and actually going out and recruiting, trying to work with maybe, like Brunswick bowling, like, can we get a bowling alley? Can we give incentives, to get more businesses to come in, and that would serve, the younger folks that get, the kids that get out of school, like where do they go? Yeah. And that would also bring in more tax money, to just make it enticing for more businesses to come in. I would love to see like a gaming arcade and just different things like that. But I also think, I know you asked me the question about the $1 million, but I also think that Arroyo Grande, if I'm to be elected, I really want to focus on increasing in tourism. So I believe that Arroyo Grande could, because I know a lot of people will like shy away from that. Like, we don't want to end up, too touristy, and I agree. So so for instance, my vision would be to create Christmas as like the main tourist thing. So you're kind of focusing on one part of the year that could literally bring in a lot of money, because we have such a unique, attraction to offer. To the village, yes, and really investing in that, and then also collaborating and combining our efforts with the historical society, because that's a gem. So I love putting together Santa's Spectacular Village over at the Historical Society, and helping to raise money for the Christmas lights and decorations in the village. And I think that we could really expand on that, because that's almost like a 6-week tourist attraction, and we could, so that way it's not like all the time, but we have some focused things that we could bring tourism in. And I also believe that we need to put a billboard on the freeway, on the southbound and northbound, to draw people off of the freeway, because Arroyo Grande is the gateway, in my opinion, to the Central Coast. So here we have like 250 wineries. You just go right through this beautiful historic village. We have art galleries and wonderful restaurants and great little unique boutiques and shops, so we have so much to offer if we just get them off the freeway, and then they can go enjoy their day, touring the wineries. But we're also, 5-7 minutes from the beach. So we just have that to offer. I just think it's so spectacular.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Tourism, I think, would also help without having to raise taxes.
Well, that's great. Something I'm really glad you brought up is the village of Arroyo Grande is extremely special. However, I'd like to know a little bit more, is that when people talk about Arroyo Grande, oftentimes I know my mind personally can just be drawn to the village on Branch Street. However, what would you say to voters that don't specifically live in the village of Arroyo Grande, the outside the village core? Why would you be providing in their interests and taking care of them, as opposed to maybe the businesses there on Branch Street or the people in the surrounding neighborhoods? Because there's a limited amount of space for people to live, and a limited amount of space for businesses. So for the people outside of the village, I guess, what is your message, or why would you be looking out for them in addition to the people there in the village? And
sure. I do think that the village could, help fund some of the infrastructure, repair, or even new infrastructure for the people that don't live in the village. And I do think developing the area on Grand that's just past the freeway, developing that into multi-use, with new businesses, but also really reflecting the vibe of the village. Like, I loved it that like where Andrini's is, that beautiful, the stone architecture, and also with the gallery that just went in, trying to imitate that, which I think we would bleed that into Grand. So trying to improve, trying to do some redevelopment. I think redevelopment is really important. We have a lot of space that since I've lived here just seems to sit and not be sold, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of effort to reach out to the owners to find out, would you consider selling it, or maybe we could bring in a bowling alley or something else that, would increase the way of life for the better for the people that don't live in the village.
I agree. I think it's utilizing all areas of Arroyo Grande, because as I said, I think the village is so special, but there's so many areas outside of the village core that are special. So I'm glad to hear that you've got your eyes and your sights set on that and have a plan for it. Now, some things I wanted to talk about also was in some of the recent city council meetings, they've, we prefaced this a little bit earlier, reducing public comment from 3 minutes to 1 minute. I understand that's something that you're passionate about, but what we've seen is that they've reduced public comment to 1 minute, and then you oftentimes want to continue to speak over that. Do you feel that if you were to be elected to a mayoral seat, would you continue to do some of those same restrictions on public comment, or what would you do differently? Or flipping the seat around, if you were sitting in the mayoral seat and someone was doing what you're doing, what would your way to take on it would be, as opposed to what the city council is doing, say, when you go to speak?
Sure.
Yeah.
I would reach out to the person that has grievances that keeps repeatedly showing up. And some of the grievances have to do with their ideologies. So when you take an ideology and you actually create a policy to reflect that ideology and then vote it in, I would immediately try to encourage the other city council members to revoke that and get rid of that. And I think that, then when you have people like myself and others that will stand up and speak because they're concerned about DEI and social justice policies, or they're worried about this new tax that's coming in, or they're concerned about, lots of different things, just construction in front of their homes, or they would like to, like the, Sunrise Terrace community was really worried about putting in that Verizon tower. And so really just reaching out to them and maybe even driving out there. And then I also watched, the poor, situation with a landowner who they were trying to force into spending a lot of money to, instead of allowing him to have his own well, because he really is almost like in the unincorporated area, but they were really trampling all over his constitutional rights, I believe. So I would, really try to listen. I mean, a lot of times which is really discouraging and actually very upsetting, is that when there's a big issue, I have witnessed now, like for 3 years, where the council will, like, you're supposed to be listening to the public, but then they'll whip out their prepared statement. That would be like a judge, like, already deciding, even though the two attorneys just did their closing arguments, like, did you already decide? Like, why are we wasting our time? So just getting back to what you're really your actual role is. It's a land use agency focusing on things that affect the lifestyle, the land use, the parks, the roads, and just boil that down and stick to that. It's actually wouldn't be as complicated then, right? If you're really just doing your job instead of, being off, just with all these different distractions. So I would definitely return, public comment for the items that are not on the agenda to 3 minutes, and that's something that's even arguable. Like, the Constitution protects us to be able to, the First Amendment, to go and voice our grievances to our elected officials. And so when you start to chip away at their rights because you don't like what they're saying, who's the problem here, right? So we need to listen to our citizens, and even if they are very upset or they keep repeating themselves or whatever their grievances are. So, and that's a there's an argument that you could even say maybe 3 minutes isn't long enough, but it seems to be pretty traditional that people have kind of come together and be like, okay, that's pretty reasonable. And you could get like a group of people to speak on the same subject, but why would you want to infringe on your citizens' rights to speak? It blows my mind.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your opinion and on that. A few more things I wanted to touch on, and then we can get to, let's see. Something I was really interested to hear about is that you've talked about some of these, the DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion, and saying that you don't want that to be part of city council's decision making. If there was a private citizen that felt that was important for it to be a part of, and if you were to be elected mayor, how would you feel you could reach out across the aisle and to incorporate maybe people that have different beliefs or ideologies from you, professionally or personally? How are you going to incorporate all of Arroyo Grande as opposed to maybe just people that maybe share the same views as you?
Sure. So I've actually put together a binder of research on what actually, and it's actually diversity, equity, not equality.
Yeah.
That's okay. And inclusion. And what the message is that if you have to create a policy to dictate that, and that's what they've done. They've said that they're going to enforce it basically against us, and it comes from critical race theory. So it's Marxism, and it sounds really pretty and all, but it's socialism, Marxism that is not pretty. We don't need it. So we go back to the Constitution. So I would just reach out, share with them this binder that I've put together, what it all leads to if we continue down this path, and that if we all can just unite under the United States flag as a symbol of our unity, and remember we are a constitutional republic, then we don't need any of this. And it also, when you do things like that, when you say like, oh, Arroyo Grande is diverse and equitable and inclusive, you're insinuating that we weren't, and we are one of the most welcoming, communities. Like the first time I ever heard of DEI was in a TBID, the tourist business industry district of the city. I started going to those meetings because I was really concerned about how mismanaged that was, in my opinion, and the money being wasted. And so I was like, why do we need these unnecessary words in our marketing? Because how about just use the word welcoming? All are welcome here. So I would just really try to encourage people to communicate, because I get a lot of people calling names racist, bigot, and that's for weak people. If you stand firm on your beliefs, you don't need to call other people names. Right? So let's just have a civil conversation, and it might get heated at times, but it's like really listen so that people, can hear other people's perspectives, because a lot of misconception of where I stand is just because people want to listen to their bias or what's in the news and what makes them feel comfortable. And unfortunately, people like drama. So they almost rather go into that path instead of like, how about we be loving and supportive of all people and eliminate all bullying in school. Like we don't need, to have special rights for certain children or a certain community. And that's another thing I really push back on. I don't think that that you can lump people into a community. I think we're all individuals. So to just label them, a certain label, I think is totally inappropriate. And then we should all be treated and, as individuals with our liberties. And as long as I'm not infringing on your liberties and you're not infringing on my liberties, that's what our whole country is built on. So not trying to force your ideology or beliefs or policies on me and let me, don't infringe on my liberties.
Well said. Thank you so much. Let's see. Someone I wanted to ask you is, I understand that you've run for public office before and haven't been elected. What would you say you've learned from your prior experience in campaigning, and what do you say that you're doing differently now to hopefully have a different outcome in this election cycle?
Sure. So, of course, that was the first time I've ever run for any office, so very green to the whole situation. And I don't have a budget. I don't ask for any campaign contributions because I don't want to be obligated to anybody. So it wasn't like I had a campaign manager. So I just did the best I could, and I just followed my instinct. And actually, some people thought I did pretty good for, my first, time out. And the incumbent has been in, local politics since 2005. And I'm not impressed with her record. So I think that now that 2 years had passed, I've learned so much more, and I've gotten really much more educated on exactly what is the role of the mayor and the city council and the city, incorporated, just really focusing on the job, which is pretty darn basic. And like I said, I just think it's you begin to fail if it's almost like you think you're more powerful or giving yourself more responsibility than you don't have the right to take, or even bring certain policies or beliefs into the government. It's like, just stick to what your job description is. So that's what I think what I've done differently is just really educated myself and really focusing on now that I have a better understanding of exactly what type of city it is and what the roles of everybody are.
Well, I'm impressed with your tenacity, because I know it's being in the public eye, let alone being trying to be elected for public office. That's not something easy to do. So to come back and want to do it again is I'm impressed by you, because I can't say I know I would want to do that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, something else I wanted to ask you about is I understand that you're passionate about some educational and school issues. And from what I understand is that some of these maybe decisions that if you were to be elected mayor wouldn't fall under your jurisdiction as mayor. Why do you feel that the mayoral seat would be something that's better suited to what you're passionate about as opposed to maybe one of the upcoming school board seats?
I think that with my, what I bring to the table with my experience, my business consulting experience and marketing, et cetera, operations, I think that my skills can be better used in the role that I'm trying to win.
Sure.
And I think that it's very discouraging to me when any elected official or any citizen doesn't speak against things that might be harming children. So I do think it's the responsibility of anyone who's got a voice, and the mayor does have a voice, to either say you're for pornography in the high school, just because Gavin Newsom has made it a law that it needs to be in the high school. You still have a voice. You don't have to agree with him unless you do agree with him, which that is what I suspect. She is a high school teacher, and I just don't understand why people, no matter what they're elected, I don't care what your jurisdiction is. Children that are being abused is everyone's responsibility, and jurisdiction and moral obligation to protect and see what's really going on. I think, we're ranked, 49th worst public schools in academia in the country, so that's nothing to be proud of. We have eliminated civics classes, and just, again, it's almost like the city is being run like the schools. It's like, how about you just do the jobs that you were hired to do? Teach children what you know that they should be learning, the basics, so that they can get through life. And then, as I mentioned before, if there's always going to be children that are misfits, or maybe people will tend to bully them, and as adults, teachers and administrators, you intervene and just make it a no bullying zone, period. It doesn't matter. There's no special rights for anybody. It's like, let's protect all children. And we definitely don't need some of the, I found the pornography that's over at the school. There's about 50 books, and it's not just a certain type of pornography. There's, heterosexual, gay, you name it. But if there's erotica, there is very, very, very graphic illustrations, and it's not appropriate. And I don't know, wrong is wrong and right is right. I don't know how we got so off track when it comes to that. And so I did do a demonstration over at the high school trying to encourage the other children that weren't in the LGBTQ, what they labeled them as that. And I really think a lot of the kids that are in that group, like I said, again, I don't even think it's a community. I think they should all be treated like individuals, and maybe they're wrapped up into this, group mentality. To remind them that they don't have more rights than the other children. So if a girl is in fact, I met a former AG high school girl who actually complained because there was a male in the locker room. And she complained. She was the one that was chastised for complaining. So we need to get back to all children's rights matter and some common sense. And we have to make sure that all children are safe. And in my opinion, I think it's been proven over and over and over, males in girls' spaces and sports is not safe for them. So we just need to get our moral compasses in order and just get back to some common sense. And I do think it's the mayor's role to speak out when it's so obviously wrong. And there's a mayor who helped create an ordinance in Huntington Beach where they voted in favor of the ordinance to make sure that parents have rights, trying to override the state's initiatives to try to demolish parents' rights over their children. Making them the ward of the state is never a good idea. So I do think that the mayor can have a voice and doesn't have to be on the school board.
No. Well, thanks for sharing. Thanks for answering the question. I've got two more questions for you. One is, and I'm going to time you, Gaea, is that I'm going to ask you if you had 1 minute to ask the average Arroyo Grande citizen why they should vote for you. And I'm going to time you, and I want to see if you can be succinct and tell it. But I would say, tell me in 1 minute on why somebody should vote for you. Go.
Because I have extensive business experience, and people hire me to go into their businesses, and I go in and I evaluate, I re-engineer if needed, and I believe that I can do that for the city. And I'm totally transparent. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do a job. So, and I'm going to be respectful and open to everyone that comes to me. And I think that Arroyo Grande needs that. And I'm also very fiscally responsible. I'm very dedicated to knowing where every cent of the taxpayers' money is going. And it would be very focused on infrastructure, making sure safety, make sure we have enough funds for the fire and police, but our parks are very important, and really getting back to that. I probably read it already,
no,
but just really getting back to what the job description is. It's like they can count on me to do
reach
that.
Out and high five you. You're close enough. That's great. No, thank you for sharing. And my last question to you, Gaea, is there anything that you would like to leave this interview with, if we haven't touched on it, that you feel that people should know about you, Gaea Powell, that you want to relay over to the voter or to the community or to the city council or the person you're running against? What would you want to relay in as our last point in our interview today?
Sure. I would like to reach out. I would like to reach out to them, which I have over and over and over, to the city council now, or anybody in our community that would like to sit down and have a coffee. So that's what I'd like them to know about me.
Where the real dialogue can happen.
Exactly. And so much, we have so much in common. If we could just get rid of this divisive attitude that has been, infiltrated our culture, all the way from the federal all the way down, that people have just been kind of wrapped up in, and almost like this hysteria, and forgetting that we have to. If there's an emergency, there's only a handful of people that you're really going to be able to count on, and it's your neighbors. So go meet your neighbors. So I would love to, have more events like that, like really encouraging people, meet your neighbors, know who they are. If there's a crisis, that's who you need to reach out to. And I want the community to know that they can reach out to me during a crisis, like the way that I handled the COVID, for the businesses that I consulted with, and that I would never isolate them. Even if we had to meet at the Walmart parking lot, we have to keep that line of communication and support each other, and that spirit of community always has to be protected.
Oh, the spirit of community. I love that. I think that's what Arroyo Grande is all about. Well, Gaea, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and it's a pleasure being here with you. Best of luck with the election cycle. We're excited to see what's to come for you. And again, thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.